Ready? Okay, I heard that the decaf chai was good. Oh man, that was a hit. Okay, great. I'm going to get started. Hey, Josh. Josh, what are you doing, man? Come on. Sharmony, get a hold of this guy. Whose husband is this? All right, I'm going to have a quick prayer. Father in heaven, bless us as we continue our study. We ask in the name of Jesus, amen. You guys can shut that door if you don't mind, and that way the rabble-rousers out there can carry on. Okay, so when Jesus says, Peter's feeling pious, and he says, hey, how many times should I forgive? 7 times. Jesus says, not 7, but you remember what it was? 70 times 7. That's not, Jesus didn't just pull that number out of the air. That is an intentional quotation of an Old Testament prophecy found in the book of Daniel. And what I'm going to show you here, it's difficult to know how deep to go. So we're just going to go kind of on the surface, and if we have to go deeper, we will, because there's a lot I want to cover tonight. We've just got about 40 minutes to do it, maybe 45. Okay, first of all, going back to Daniel chapter 9. Daniel is one of the major prophets in the Old Testament. You have the so-called major prophets, and then you have the minor prophets. The major prophets are Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, and Daniel. Daniel is the smallest of the major prophets, at least in terms of the size of the book. There's only 12 chapters in the book. And Daniel is the book that contains many stories that many Bible believers would be familiar with. And many people who don't know the Bible would know Daniel in the lion's den, or Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That's the book we're talking about. But in addition to these beautiful stories, there's also some fascinating prophecies. And we're going to take a look at one in particular tonight, maybe 2. In Daniel chapter 9, there's a story. Let's just turn there. We're going to spend some time there. So you'll be hugely benefited if you can just look at it. If you can't, you're all right. But just follow along carefully here. So you got Daniel chapter 9. And let me paint the picture here a little bit. Daniel is a Jew. His city, Jerusalem, and the temple associated with it has been destroyed by a Babylonian by the name of Nebuchadnezzar. This happens in around 605 BC. So Daniel and many others, probably thousands of others, were brought from Jerusalem. Young men were brought back to Babylon, and there they were trained in the language, the ways, and they were trained as Babylonians, and even given Babylonian names, in fact. So Daniel rises because he has an ability to interpret dreams, kind of like Joseph back in the book of Genesis. Remember, he interpreted Pharaoh's dream. Daniel, because he has this ability to interpret dreams, one of which we'll talk about the next time we're together on Thursday, he rises up to, kind of like Joseph again, second in command. Where Joseph was second in command to the Pharaoh in Egypt, Daniel rises right up to second in command to Nebuchadnezzar, which would have been awkward because Nebuchadnezzar would have been the one who was himself responsible for the destruction of Daniel's home city and very likely the death of Daniel's own parents. So this is a tricky situation. Daniel finds himself there, but he was faithful. He said, listen, I'm going to be faithful in wherever I'm at, whatever I'm doing, I'm going to be faithful. And Daniel lives to be quite an old man. We encounter him first in Daniel chapter 1. He's a young man. He's probably not out of his teens. And by the time we get to him in Daniel chapter 9, he's an old man. He'd be at least into his 80s, late 70s, 80s, and he might have even been into his 90s. He's an old man. And he has seen a series of visions. Daniel chapter 7 is a vision, Daniel chapter 8 is a vision, and Daniel chapter 9 is a vision. In Daniel chapter 9, we find Daniel praying one of the most astonishing prayers in all of Scripture. And it's one of the most beautiful prayers. And I'm just going to read a part of it for you. Daniel chapter 9, verse 1. It says, in the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, of the lineage of the Medes, who was made king over the realm of the Chaldeans, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood by books the number of the years specified by the word of the Lord through Jeremiah the prophet, that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolations of Jerusalem. Okay, this is Daniel saying, look, I've been now, Jerusalem was destroyed almost 70 years ago. I went back and started reading through some of the ancient scrolls, and he read through Jeremiah, who wasn't particularly ancient for Daniel. He was actually a contemporary of Daniel's, I think, Daniel lived just as Jeremiah was kind of passing off the scene, Daniel was coming onto the scene. So he goes back and he reads some of these scrolls, and he finds in the prophet Jeremiah that God would accomplish 70 years in the desolation of Jerusalem. Now, we should say that the reason that Babylon came was in response to Judah's, which is Israel, I'll just simplify it, in response to Israel's consistent neglect of God's covenant. And God had made a covenant with Abraham and with his descendants, and it basically said, listen, if you do this and this, I'm going to do this and 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 this. The amount of faithfulness required, the amount of things that they needed to do in order to be God's covenant people was like this big, and the things that God said he was going to do was like this big. It was giant. But even those minor things, which are basically encapsulated in the Ten Commandments, those minor things were lost sight of, and they began to pursue the pagan religions and pursue other gods, and God finally said, hey, look, I'm in a pickle of a situation here. I can't call you my people if you don't behave like my people. And so finally, he gives them over, as parents sometimes have to do, to the consequences of their own bad choices, right? And as parents, those of us in here that have children, you know that there are times where you just have to let your children make bad choices, and then, this is the hard part for parents, you have to let them suffer the consequences of those bad choices that they make. And this wasn't God's not being a knee-jerk, sort of quick, thing with his people. He was patient and merciful and kind and patient and patient and patient and patient and patient and patient. God finally said, hey, look, if we keep going down this road, you are so rejecting and resisting my will for you and my protection of you, I'm going to have to honor your choice. This is going to be, and I don't want to do that. And eventually he does. Israel goes away into Assyrian captivity, Judah, and never to be heard from again, frankly. And Judah goes into Babylonian captivity. So now here's what happens. Daniel is aware of all this. And Daniel, as an old man, kneels down to pray. And I want you to hear part of this prayer. It's one of the most beautiful prayers recorded in all the Bible. Then I set my face toward the Lord God to make request by prayer and supplication with fasting and sackcloth and ashes. When a Jew was doing the sackcloth and ashes thing and fasting, that means that this is like mega serious, super serious prayer. This was an opportunity to just humble your heart before God and to just pour your soul out to him. Verse 4, check this out. And I prayed to the Lord my God, and I made my confession, and I said, O Lord, great and awesome God. That's how he addresses God. O Lord, great and awesome God, comma, and notice the first thing that comes out of his mouth. Who keeps his covenant? First thing that he says. Very first thing that he says in his prayer after he's addressed God formally. O Lord, great and awesome God, comma, who keeps his covenant. And that was what it all boiled down to. That God had been faithful in everything that he said he would do, all the blessings he promised he would give, he had done. He had given, and the consequences that he said back in the law of Moses, hey, listen, if you don't, and you're not my people, then these are the consequences that will eventuate. And so he says, you have kept your covenant, not only on the positive side, but you have also kept your covenant on the negative side. You have honored our request to depart from you, as tragic as that is. Then he says, now watch this, you who keep your covenant and mercy with those who love him, and with those who keep his commandments, now watch this, we have sinned. And Daniel's going to find every possible way that he can to articulate their departure from God's covenant. So he says, we have sinned, number one. We have committed iniquity, number two. We have done wickedly, number three. We have rebelled, number four. Even by departing from your precepts, number five, and your judgments, number six. Neither have we heeded your servants, the prophets, seven, who spoke in your name to our kings and our princes, to all the fathers and all the peoples of the land. O Lord, righteousness belongs to you, but to us shame of face, 8, as it is at this day, to the men of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and all of Israel, those that are near and those that are far off, and to all the countries which you have driven them, because of the unfaithfulness which they have committed against you. O Lord, to us belongs shame of face, to our kings, to our princes, to our fathers, because we have sinned against you. To the Lord our God belongs mercy and forgiveness, though we have rebelled against him. We have not obeyed the voice of the Lord our God to walk in his laws that he set before us by his servants the prophets. Yes, all of Israel has transgressed your law and has departed so as not to obey your voice. Therefore, the curse, the oath that was written in the law of Moses, the servant of God, has been poured out upon us because we have sinned against God. Okay, he basically, I don't know, 9 or 10 ways he says, we have rebelled, we have sinned, we have departed, we have not paid attention, all of this, but you have been faithful. You have been faithful, you have been faithful, you have been faithful, you have been faithful. And the key word, I wonder if anybody picked up on it. What's the key word that Daniel uses to describe God's faithfulness? Righteousness. He says, you are righteous. Now, here's a tricky thing. When I say the word righteous, and when we think about the word righteous in a religious context, especially God being righteous, I don't know what you think of. But for a long time, I just thought God was just really good. Like he's just really, really good. He's so good that he like glows. It's like, there's just righteousness that comes off of God. That is not what's being spoken of. The word righteousness has a very specific meaning. It's broad, but it also has a very specific epicenter of meaning. And it comes down, helpfully enough, even in the English, to the root word, which is right. Right. And what it means is that God has done right. And in the context of the covenant, what it means is God has done what he said he would do. It's not just some vague moral goodness. It means that God said he would do it, and he did it. He said he would do it, and he did it. He said he would do it, so here's this covenantal arrangement between Abraham and his descendants. And Daniel wants to be perfectly clear. In the covenant lawsuit between God and his people, God has no guilt. He has no negligence. He has no unfairness. Everything that God said he would do, he has done. We, on the other hand, we have rebelled, we have departed, we have sinned, we have transgressed, etc. So he's just pouring his heart out. Now, in the midst of this beautiful and simultaneously pathetic prayer, an angel shows up. Now, that's a powerful prayer. I mean, I've prayed what I thought were some really heartfelt, earnest prayers. Maybe it's the sackcloth and ashes thing. I've never done that. Maybe I got to work on that. But I've not yet had an angel show up in my prayer. That just hasn't happened. But an angel shows up. And I'll read now in verse 20. Now while I was speaking and praying and confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and while I was presenting my supplication before the Lord my God, for the holy mountain of God, for Jerusalem, he's praying for Jerusalem. And by the way, I just want to say a quick word here. Daniel's main concern, by the way, was not Daniel. Daniel's concern is, God, we have made you look terrible among the heathen. We have blasphemed your name. And Daniel was not like, oh, Lord, what about me? What about He's saying, no, God, we've blew it. We made you look terrible. We could have done so much better. We're sorry. Please, God, for your name's sake, for your righteousness, so that the others will see a true picture of you, bless us. But it's a very different prayer than we often pray. Lord, bless me for me. Daniel's like, please, Lord, bless us, your covenant people, so that others can have access to this beautiful picture of who and what you are. So then this angel shows up in verse 21. Gabriel shows up in verse 21. And he says in verse 22, oh, Daniel, I have come now forth to give you skill to understand. I want to make you to understand not only what's happening here, but what's happening in these visions that you've been seeing. At the beginning of your prayers, the command went out, and I have come to tell you, for you are greatly beloved. Therefore, consider the matter and understand the vision. Now, what follows next, 24, 25, 26, 27? These 4 verses are hugely significant, and it's the very prophecy to which Jesus was alluding when Peter said, hey, look, should I forgive my brother 7 times? Jesus says, oh, no, 70 times 7. Okay? Now, I'm going to read this through, and you probably won't get it, which is okay. I didn't get it like the first 50 times. But I'm going to read it through anyway, and then I'm going to show you a simple key that will unlock it for you. Okay? Here it goes. This is what the angel says to Daniel in response to his beautiful prayer about God's faithfulness and their unfaithfulness. 70 weeks are determined for your people. Well, there it is. 70 weeks. How many days are in a week? There it is. 77s are determined, are separated for your people Israel. Okay? Now watch what happens. 70 weeks are determined for your people and for your holy city. That would be Jerusalem. And then he gives them 6 things. Number 1, to finish the transgression. Number 2, to make an end of sins. Number 3, to make reconciliation for iniquity. Number 4, to bring in everlasting righteousness. Number 5, to seal up the vision. And number 6, to anoint the most holy. Okay? You got 70 weeks that are set aside. This is your laundry list. This is the grocery list. This is what you're going to do. Okay. Verse 25. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to rebuild Jerusalem unto Messiah the Prince. Whoa! That's the very one. That's the one. That's the one we're looking for. In my Bible, King James, New King James, they even get it right. Messiah, capital, Prince, capital. This is the Messiah. And the Messiah, the angel just showed up and said, hey, listen, understand this. From the going forth of the command to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, because Jerusalem is a wreck right now. It's a mess. And he says there's going to be a command. And from Daniel, the people can start counting from that command. Daniel would be dead by this point. But the people can, he was writing this. From that command, people can count to the coming of Messiah the Prince. How long can they count? Watch this. There will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. Okay, well that's easy. 7 plus 62, 69 weeks. Okay, so from the moment that decree goes forward, the people can count 69 weeks. Now, these aren't literal weeks. These are weeks of years. right? They can count this extended period of time. The street will be built again, Daniel. Jerusalem will be built again, and the wall will be built again, even in difficult times. After the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off. What? The Messiah, the deliverer, will be cut off? Yes, but not for himself. The people of the prince who is to come, they will destroy the city and they will destroy the sanctuary. Again? You mean we're going to rebuild it and it's going to be destroyed again? Yes. The end of it will be with a flood. Until the end of the war, desolations are determined. Then he will confirm the covenant. Oh, this is huge. He will confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week he will bring an end to sacrifice and offering, and on the wing of abominations will be one who makes desolate, even until the consummation which is determined is poured out on the desolate. Okay, it's not super easy to get, but you can get two basic ideas, and they're up here on the screen for you. What you see is this idea of the Messiah, his coming, and his ultimate rejection. He's cut off, but not for himself, and then what follows is destruction. So you have this Messiah rejected, followed by destruction, or the city will be destroyed. Now, here's a cool little thing for those of you that actually have Daniel 9 right in front of you. Daniel 9, verses 25 to 27 are written in an A-B poetic format, okay, which a lot of Hebrew poetry is written this way. In English poetry, it sort of hinges on what's called rhyme and meter, right? So roses are red, violets are blue, sugar is sweet, and so are you. Rhyme and meter. Hebrew poetry was not this way. Hebrew poetry didn't hinge on rhyme or meter. It hinged on a thematic restatement of ideas. So you'd say something and then you'd say it again, but in different language. So I'll give you some examples. Some of them you'd know. So it'll say things like, thy word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. Psalm 119, verse 105. So it's called recapitulation, and that's how Hebrew poetry works. Thy word is a lamp to my feet. Yeah, and it's a light to my path. And you have all of these really beautiful, you go read the Psalms and you find this recapitulation. The psalmist, the poet would say something and then say it again in slightly different words. It's like if you look into your eyes, the eyes of your wife, and say, sweetheart, you look astonishing. You are beautiful. Right? You're saying something, then you say it again. That's how Hebrew poetry works. You say something, then you say it again. And this poetry would begin to take on some very sophisticated organizational patterns. Like, for example, you could go A, B, C, A, B, C, A, B, C. That's one pattern. The most simple pattern was just A, B, A, B, A, B. And then there were these reverse patterns, what were called chiasms, which would be like A, B, C, B, A. A, B, C, D, C, B, A, right? So you got these really cool, and one of the beauties of Hebrew poetry is to try and find those almost rhythmic patterns, those recapitulations of ideas. Now check this out. In Daniel chapter 9, verses 25, 26, and 27, you have an A, B, A, B, A, B pattern. So here's what we're going to do. This is really cool. I'm going to read the A part of those three verses, and I'm not going to read the B part. I'm just going to read the A in 25, 26, 27. And you're going to see they all have to do with Messiah, and when we leave out the B part, we'll come back to the B part in just a second, you'll see it just flows and it makes perfect sense. Okay? This is really exciting. Check this out. Not like I had to tell you that. This is really exciting. Hold up the applause sign. Okay, here we go. Verse 25, I'm going to read the first part, then I'm going to jump down and read the first part of 26, I'm going to jump down and read the first part of 27. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem unto Messiah the Prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. And after the 62 weeks, Messiah will be cut off, but not for himself. Then he will confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week, he will bring an end to sacrifice and offering. Perfect sense. Did you see it? It just flows. It just makes such sense. Now we'll go read the B part. The B part has to do with the city, Jerusalem. Okay? So now I'm going to read the second part of 25, second part of 26, and the second part of 27. And watch this. It all has to do with the city. The street will be built again, and the wall, even in troublesome times. And the people of the prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end of it will be with a flood. Until the end of the war, desolations are determined. And on the wing of abominations will be one who makes desolate, even until the consummation which is determined is poured out on the desolate. Basically what it's saying in some very picturesque and not always easy to understand language is that the city will be destroyed. The city will be miserably destroyed, and will the temple. Well, here's where things just get really wild. In Matthew chapter 21, Jesus told a parable. I'll speed read it for you, okay? If you want to join me there, you can, but rather than telling it to you, Jesus can tell it better than I can, so I'll just speed read the parable for you. Matthew chapter 21. Okay. Jesus is speaking to the religious leaders of his day, and he says this. Hear another parable. There was a certain landowner who planted a vineyard, and he put a hedge around it, and he dug a winepress in it, and he built a tower, and he leased it to his vine dressers, who went away into a far country. Now, when the vintage time drew near, he sent his servants to his vine dressers to receive the fruit, and the vine dressers took his servants, and they beat one and killed one and stoned another. Then he sent other servants more than the first, and they did likewise to them. Then last of all, he sent his son, saying, they will respect my son. But when the vine dressers saw the son, they said to themselves, whoa, this is the heir. Come, let us kill him and seize his inheritance. So they took him and they cast him out of the vineyard and they killed him. Therefore, when the owner of the vineyard comes, what will he do to the vine dressers? They said to him, after Jesus tells this story, he's speaking to the religious leaders of his day, the Pharisees and the scribes. He's like, what do you think he would do? And they're like, this is obvious. Look at this. He will destroy those wicked men miserably, and he will lease his vineyard to other vine dressers who will render him fruits in their seasons. And Jesus must have thought to himself, how can you see it in the story and you can't see it in real life? So then he says, haven't you ever read in your own scriptures, the stone that the builders rejected, the same has become the chief cornerstone. This is the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes. Verse 43, one of the most astonishing verses in the New Testament. Jesus said to the religious leaders of his day, therefore the kingdom of heaven will be taken to you and given to a nation bearing the fruits thereof. Okay, you know what Jesus just told? He just told Daniel 9 in a parable. God set his people up, Israel. They were a vineyard. He gave them a hedge. He gave them a wine tower. He took care of them, took massively good care of them. And then he sent his servants. Who do you think the servants might have been? The prophets. And then he sent more servants. And then finally he sends his son. And what do they do to the son? They kill the son. So he says, hey, what do you think they would? Well, destruction. And he says, exactly. Destruction. Now check this out. Go to Matthew 23. In Matthew 23, Jesus goes into the temple for the last time. Jesus goes into the Jewish temple, and he's tried everything. He's tried healing. He's tried miracles. He's tried tender words of affection. He's tried parables. I mean, he's tried everything. And now he is so desperate for his people to receive him as the promised Messiah, he tries anger. And he goes in, and he just lets them have it. Not in an unsanctified way, but in a very serious way, in a very heartfelt way. And 8 times he repeats this phrase, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees. Woe to you. And the things that he says are so interesting. Listen to this. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you shut the kingdom of heaven against men, for you neither go in yourselves, nor do you allow those who are entering to go in. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, for you devour widows' houses for a pretense, and you make these long prayers. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. You travel land and sea to win one convert, and when he is won, you make him twice as son of hell as yourself. Woe to you, blind guides, who say, whoever swears by the temple, oh, to him it is nothing, but whoever swears by the gold of the temple, he's obliged to perform it. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees. You pay tithe of mint and cumin and anise, and you neglect the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faith. These you ought to have done and not to have left the other. He just lets them have it. And then he says, this is mind-blowing. Verse 37. Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you that kills the prophets and stones those that are sent to you. This is the parable he just told, perhaps hours before and not more than days before. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kills the prophets and stones those that are sent to you. How often I wanted to gather you together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing. Your house is left to you. Jesus chooses this word with great intentionality. What word did we just read? What word did we just read again and again in the book of Daniel? Desolation. Desolation. The abomination of desolation. Desolation. So Jesus says here, your house is left to you desolate, which is remarkable because when Jesus began his public ministry, he said, you have made my Father's house a den of thieves. My Father's house. Now what does he say? Your house is left to you desolate. A transition has taken place. It's not my house anymore. It's yours now. You can have it. Your house is left to you desolate. For I say to you, you will see me no more till you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Then chapter 24, verse 1, watch this. Jesus leaves the temple, walks out of the temple precincts for the last time. He'll never go back in that temple again. He goes up and he sits on a mountain and he starts crying. Jesus is weeping. He's crying. And the disciples are like, man, this is not a good look. This is not what we were thinking. They were like, man, this guy's the Messiah. And now he's been rejected by the religious leaders. He's just completely offended everybody possible. And now he's sitting on the top of a mountain and crying. And the disciples have been thinking, man, this is not what we signed up for when we joined the Messiah Club. This is not what we thought we were getting. So they come and try and cheer Jesus up. Look at this, verse 1. The disciples came to show him the buildings of the temple. They're like, Jesus, look at the temple. Cheer up. It'll be all right. We'll try again tomorrow. And Jesus, he knows exactly what's going on. And he turns his attention to his disciples and he says, do you not see all these things? Do you not see the temple? Don't you see all of this? I say to you, there will not be one stone left upon another that will not be thrown down. You know what he's saying? This city is doomed. How did Jesus know the city was doomed? Because he'd read Daniel chapter 9. Messiah is going to come. He's going to confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. He will be rejected. He'll be cut off, but not for himself. And then the prince will come and flood the city and destroy it. Jesus knew what was going on. How did Jesus know what was going on? From the prophecy. The very prophecy, and here it is. This is absolutely mind-blowing. Now let's just look at it. So here's this long black line represents the 70 weeks of years, the 490, remember? 70 weeks are determined for your people, the angel said to Daniel. So there's the 70, okay? And he said that from the going forth of the command to restore and rebuild Jerusalem to Messiah the Prince will be 69 weeks, or 69 weeks of years, which if you take 69 and you multiply it by 7, you get 483 years, one less than the full 490, 1 week less. Now here's a remarkable thing. We know the very year that Jesus was baptized. How do we know it? Well, we know it because a historian, a Gentile historian by the name of Luke, records it with phenomenal detail. Let me read it to you. Luke chapter 3, verse 1. In the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar, Pontius Pilate being governor of Judea, Herod being tetrarch of Galilee, and his brother Philip tetrarch of Iturea and the region of Trachonitis, and Licinius was tetrarch of Abilene, while Annas and Caiaphas were high priests, the word of God came to John, the son of Zacharias, in the wilderness, and he went into all the region of the Jordan, preaching